Hey, welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. We're going to start talking about processed food just a little bit here. This is part of the body ecology concept, and it gets very broad very quickly. But there's something that's come up recently, and it's these levels 0 to 4 or 1 to 4 of processing, food processing. And various people in the keto, carnivore, and natural food communities are discussing it, and I think that the model is somewhat broken or has some presuppositions that I kind of disagree with. I would like to question them. Let's start with that. Okay, let's question them. So I've got a computer here. I'm going to go through and look down at it periodically and look at stuff. So if you look at, for example, we're going to go to Paleo Hacks and look at their thing. They're pulling this from the NOVA classifications. Okay, so NOVA is recognized by the NOVA group scale. 1 to 4 is recognized by the UN or something. It's not officially recognized by the USDA, but it's there. So if we look at the Paleo Hacks version, they use the NOVA system, and their explanation is not horrible, right? Group 1 is unprocessed or minimally processed. So this is whole foods like meats, vegetables, nuts. Freezing, vacuum sealing, and similar methods to preserve shelf life are acceptable here. And then group 2 is processed ingredients, okay? So this would be things that are extracted from whole foods. Honey is considered a group 2 processed ingredient because it's removed from the honeycomb. I'm not so sure that really is a model. Canned coconut milk is considered a group 2 processed food. Boxed almond milk they've got in 3. Excuse me, I'm reading the wrong line. Sugar and molasses from beets or cane sugar. This is olive oil. This is their list. Group 3 is going to be processed foods that include a couple of ingredients. Tuna in olive oil, canned veggies, salted and packed nuts, almond milk, cured or smoked meats, beer, wine, and cider, because they're processed. And I'm going to go back to that in a minute. And then group 4 is ultra processed. And this is the artificial colors, dyes, additives, lots of ingredients. Think things like candy bars, toaster strudels, non-sugar sweeteners, Diet Coke, emulsifiers. They're talking about hot dogs, which is kind of iffy. Depends on which kind of hot dog you're talking about. And so the general idea here is that the more processed the food becomes, the less healthy it is. And this is interesting. This is the Paleo Hacks interpretation of the NOVA groups. And the NOVA groups are from it's a Montanaro et al. Paper. World Nutrition was published in World Nutrition. It's not exactly a study, but it is a peer review theory, idea, something. And it's really interesting because if you look at the NOVA groups stuff from other places, you'll see that group 4, ultra processed, includes things like basic sausage. And that's really interesting. And then group 3, they would include something like a vegan protein powder, but a whey protein powder would be considered group 4. And I'm literally looking at this Open Food Facts, and group 1. They're going to Yeah, this is weird. So vegetable oil is considered a group 2 according to them. This, and once again, you can see the ideologies coming out in this. And this is one of the areas where I'm going to ask a lot of questions and question presuppositions. You can see the ideology involved in considering a vegetable oil, which has to go through a common vegetable oil, which has to go through a massive set of processes to become edible, palatable, and shelf stable. And even then, it's usually rancid by the time it's done. It's highly oxygenated, oxidizing even, and that's considered a group 2 and not a group 4. This because it's not a meat product. This is one of the things where you have to kind of question this stuff. So the NOVA system is recognized by the WHO, the Food and Agricultural FAO, Pan American Health Organization, and the UN, but not by the US FDA or the USDA, fortunately. It's a little bit interesting. Now, I'd like to just talk about it. That's basically what it is. It has these groups 1 to 4. Some people have a group 0, okay, which is the actual fresh, the difference between buying an orange in a store and picking an orange off of a tree. And there's a very valid thing there. And we'll get into that in a little bit. I'm done with the computer part now, I think. So I can tell a difference if I grind beef, if I make ground beef at home, versus if I buy it in a store, prepackaged. And it's not necessarily the tubes, the bulk stuff that comes out of the factories. There's stores that grind it on site, okay? So you can go to the local grocery store that has an actual butcher shop, and they will grind meat on site while they're trimming and making the cuts, because they get the big primal cuts in and they cut the steaks and stuff, and they do actually make grind. I will react to that differently than if I buy a fresh unpeeled tri-tip, peel it. There's a layer of tissue that you peel. It's called peeling. And grind it myself. If I grind it myself, it will feel better going down in after I eat. I will feel the difference literally. Not everyone seems to be that sensitive. Not everyone seems to be that aware. I don't know if it affects everyone, but it does affect me. And that to me is a difference between a group 0 and a group 1, or in this case more of a group 1 and group 2, because we're dealing with an actual processed, it's already not a cow, it's a piece of meat. So a group 0 would be if I went out hunting and cooked the animal on a spit right then and there. Group 0 is I've had sushi on the pier, like catch the fish, cut it up on the pier in California. That's a very different kind of thing than actually going to a common sushi bar, because a common sushi bar doesn't actually get the fish directly from the boat. It's usually processed and flown around and stuff. It's still relatively fresh, but there's something going on. There's some packaging, and it's usually sprayed. It's sprayed with something to make it wetter, drier, last longer, preserve the color. There is something added. It's not even considered an ingredient, but it is a treatment. Okay, so that's not a group 0 food. I'm not even sure if it's a group 1 food at that point, and we'll get into that in a little bit. This is going to be multiple videos because I'm already just about 10 minutes in, and I like to keep below 20 minutes for individual videos, so good luck with that, right? So in vegetable terms, or fruit terms, I was talking about oranges. A group 0 is if I go outside right now, they're fresh, they're ripe. This is the season for citrus where I'm at right now. And I can go outside and get a navel orange that is better than anything you're going to get in a store off of a tree about 60 yards from where I am sitting right now. And that's fantastic. And that is a group 0 food. And even on a fairly strict carnivore diet, I accept that that is a ancestrally appropriate thing to do once in a while. I'm not getting into the diet modes and models too much right now, but just understand that there's a group zero part of that. It is something that is naturally edible without processing, and it's better to do it that way. If you get it from a store, something will happen. They spray wax on the peel, which inhibits the oxygen flow. It gets picked unripe and flown, or goes on a boat from Argentina to here. All this stuff happens. You get, I think we get some from New Zealand. I know we get some from Argentina. We get citrus fruit from all over the world out of season. And it's really funny because when I'm Generation X, when I was growing up, we were still at the very tail end of winter citrus. So oranges used to actually be a Christmas item for a lot of people. And I had family back east, in the Northeast, in the North Central, like, Wyoming and the New England, and then Virginia. And oranges at Christmas time were actually a kind of a big deal because you just didn't get them. You didn't have that full globalization going on in the 70s and even in the early 80s. It started to creep in during the 80s, but it was still pretty common that you would have oranges in season and they would be kind of special. Okay, they were kind of special. Here, when I was a child, because I've come back to a region that I spent part of my childhood in, not the same place but close. It was pretty common for us to laugh at snowbirds and people who would buy citrus at stores, because why would you do that? It's not as good and it costs money and it's literally all over and just falls off the trees. People will actually pay you to pick their fruit so it doesn't make a mess in their yard, and I've had all sorts of stuff. My first pomelo, my first kumquats were off of trees, like all this exotic stuff that people didn't even know about until 10 years ago, 5 years ago, was just common out here. But you didn't eat too much of it. Like, you didn't go eat 5 pounds of oranges in a day. And that's one of the weird things, is that when you buy the bag of satsumas, that 3-pound bag that comes from some other country, most of the time, for 6 months out of the year, 8 months out of the year, 10 months out of the year, people do tend to actually eat more of them, like 5 or 6 or 7, instead of like walking down the street, walking to high school and grabbing one off of a tree and having one. So there's a factor there. It's a behavioral factor, and I would like to get into that further in, because this is all about body ecology. And when I go look at these groups, these NOVA groups, that's one of the things that I'm looking at. So a group 0 food is picking that orange off the tree, eating it, and moving on. If you try to store it, if you try to do something to it, it changes, okay? We currently have some salt-curing lemons sitting in a cupboard because the lemons are going and it's fun to do salt-cured lemons. They are an interesting additive to summer cocktails for people who drink. I don't, but they're also an interesting additive to occasionally to add to some sparkling water. It's basically salt, lemon-flavored salt by the time you're done with it. It's salt-cured lemons. So, we're doing that. That is a level 1. I'm going to call that a level 1 processing. Now, in the NOVA groups, it's at least a level 2. It might be a level 3. Let me rephrase that. That would be a level 2. In the NOVA groups, it would be a level 3 because it has multiple ingredients and is processed and preserved. And it's not because it's fermented. This is one of the things where I'm kind of borderline on the group 1, group 2 thing. Salt-cured lemons, kimchi, sauerkraut, dill pickles, whatever, if it's made fresh in your house. Not stuff you buy at the store, with some few exceptions, but for the most part, not stuff you buy in the store. If you buy it in the store, you add a level. Just add a level, okay? It's more processed. It's guaranteed to be more processed, and you can feel it. So salt-cured lemons are, to me, a natural food. They are a fermented. It is a ferment. Salt curing is a fermentation process. It's generally lacto fermentation, and it has become a different food. It's a living food. It has become something different. It's not the ingredients list anymore. It is a thing unto itself. Just like sauerkraut becomes something unto itself, so does kimchi. It's not just a list of ingredients. Now, you can make kimchi extremely complicated or extremely simple. So there's, I have family members who add way too much sugar to their kimchi sugar sauces because that's the expensive, fancy, elitist way to do it. And they are upper class, and that's what they do. So it's funny. I don't like it that way. I like it just very plain with the simplest possible ingredients. So, what I'm kind of getting at here is that there's a set of presuppositions in the NOVA groups. One of them, of course, is that meat is bad. That meat is inherently bad and should be assigned a different processing level, which is really funny. It's one of those things that just makes you laugh. Like, you can't take them seriously when they do that. But they seem to miss a lot of factors. So when you look at that processing, and in another video, a future video, we'll get into why this matters. Why am I even talking about this? Processed food is generally a pretty bad marker, so we're going to talk about that a lot more. But when you look at these NOVA groups, because it's becoming a bigger deal. It's a classification that is starting to hit marketing spheres, which means the USDA is going to step in and regulate it at some point and make it an official thing where you pay a fee so that you can be a NOVA 1. And everyone can go, wee, you're organic. That's what they did with organic 15, 20 years ago now. It used to have a meaning, then the USDA stepped in, and now it's just $10,000 in certification. Everyone can call themselves organic. There's a little more to it than that, but not much. So that's coming. That's coming. These NOVA groups are going to start being on packages and start being marketed to you. And they're going to be lies. Largely speaking, they're going to be lies. We've already got an idea that a vegetable oil is a not ultra-processed NOVA Group 2, not NOVA Group 4, because then no one would want to eat the vegetable oil, right? A lot of sugars are considered NOVA Group 2, even though the processing involved is, for high fructose corn syrup, for example, is just massively more complex, and there's more going on. And then honey's considered as processed as sugar, which is really weird because raw honey, like they're talking about raw honey. They're not talking about pasteurized. They're just talking about you drip it off of the honeycomb. So we'll get there. I promise. Bear with me. But I'm going to end this video now, and introduction to the NOVA groups. And I think that they're looking at things a little bit incorrectly, and they're not examining the processing effects of marketing and storage and delivery to market and these sprays that are used to keep things market fresh. Those count as ingredients, okay? They do to my body, they do to my inflammatory system, so maybe we should look at that. Stay sideways.